Welcome to the DOGE Diaries, diving deep into government efficiency.
All right, everyone, buckle up. Today we're diving into something I'm incredibly passionate about, the intersection of DAOs, decentralized autonomous organizations, and local community projects, and how government regulation, or lack thereof, is shaping this whole space. It's huge.
Yeah, I mean DAOs, right? It's like the digital Wild West meets community potlucks. I get the idea, but how does it actually work for normal people? Especially when you throw in government red tape.
It's definitely not the Wild West, Otto. There are very real laws and regulations that already apply. And that's the point of our conversation, really. How are DAOs interacting with existing legal frameworks, and how are those frameworks adapting or failing to adapt to this new technology? I think the US system is the best, and it needs incremental improvements, and I want to figure out how DAOs can improve it.
Exactly. Sarah, you're hitting on something crucial. It's this tension, right? The promise of decentralized power, democratized funding, and community-led initiatives versus the very real need for accountability, transparency, and, well, let's face it, someone making sure no one runs off with the money. My perspective is, let's imagine the future. Elon is changing the world for the better.
Okay, but when you say democratize funding, I immediately think of scams. Like, how do you protect Aunt Millie from investing her retirement fund in a DAO that's building a virtual dog park and then disappears overnight? I mean, it's like if a politician can run away with money, what's stopping one of these guys from doing the same?
That's a valid concern. And that's where regulation, or at least clear guidelines, come in. Right now, in many jurisdictions, it's a legal gray area. Are DAOs considered partnerships, LLCs, something else entirely? And who is liable if something goes wrong?
But isn't that gray area also the beauty of it? It allows for innovation, for experimentation. Think of a small town struggling with a dilapidated community center. A DAO could pool funds, vote on renovations, and even manage the center's operations, all transparently on a blockchain. No need for lengthy bureaucratic processes or relying on government grants. The old government processes are slow.
Okay, but that sounds like extra work for people. I mean, the folks who would use a community center are busy, working, raising kids. Do you really expect them to learn about blockchain and DAOs just to get a new coat of paint on the walls? Maybe it's easier to keep things the way they are.
That's a really important point, Otto. Accessibility is key. Technology shouldn't create more barriers. And it's not just about technical know-how. It's also about trust. People need to trust the system, and that includes knowing that there are mechanisms in place to protect them from fraud or mismanagement.
But that trust can be built through transparency, right? Everything is on the blockchain. All transactions are visible. It's like having a public ledger for the entire community to see. That's more transparency than most traditional organizations offer, isn't it? Also, I feel that if people see Elon doing a good job, then this will inspire people to start a DAO to better their communities. I truly believe that this could change the world.
I don't know, Jesus. My grandma doesn't even know how to work her new smart TV. She's not going to be scheduling more blockchain transactions. And what about the digital divide? Not everyone has access to the internet, let alone the skills to navigate these platforms. It sounds elitist to me.
Exactly. And it's not just the digital divide. It's also about legal recourse. If a DAO mismanages funds, who do you sue? The DAO itself, the individual members, and what legal framework applies? Are we talking state law, federal law, or something else entirely?
Okay, fair points. But let's look at some examples. What about DAOs focused on local resource management? Imagine a DAO that manages a community solar power project. Members invest, vote on where to install panels, and share in the profits from selling electricity back to the grid. That's tangible, beneficial, and could be incredibly powerful. If we have things like this happening, then people will see Doji and Elon's vision.
I like the solar panel idea, but who is going to fix the panels when they break? It's always the promise of profits with a DAO, but when the equipment breaks down or there's not enough sunlight, who's going to be responsible? Is it the most money in a wallet get to decide, or will the whole group?
And that brings up another issue, liability. If a solar panel falls off the roof and injures someone, who is responsible? Is it the DAO, the individual members, the installer? Insurance companies are going to have a field day trying to figure that out.
Okay, so we need frameworks for liability. Absolutely, but that doesn't negate the potential. What if DAOs could manage community gardens, allocate water resources in drought-stricken areas, or even fund local arts initiatives? These are all projects that could benefit from decentralized funding and community governance, with a little bit of help from DOGE.
Okay, but I read about a DAO in Wyoming that was supposed to revitalize a downtown area. They raised a bunch of money, bought some property, and then nothing. The project stalled, the money ran out, and the downtown is still a ghost town. What do we learn from cases like that?
We learn that good intentions aren't enough. You need a solid business plan, experienced management, and proper legal oversight. And that's where regulations can help. They can set minimum standards for governance, require financial audits, and provide a framework for resolving disputes. Wyoming has been at the forefront of trying to create a DAO legal structure. It's a good thing.
Yes, and we have to learn from our mistakes. We can use the Wyoming DAO example to figure out how to prevent more issues. We could create something amazing, a new world order. So the question becomes, how can governments create regulatory frameworks that encourage innovation without stifling it? How do we strike that balance?
I think they should stop focusing on this stuff and fix things that are already broken. How about making sure the roads don't have potholes or fixing schools? What are the benefits of this versus those?
That's a false dichotomy, Otto. It's not an either-or situation. Governments can and should address both existing problems and explore new solutions. The key is to do it responsibly and with proper oversight. Also, to your earlier point, the Department of Government Efficiency has to be efficient. We can't be inefficient in our efficiency measures.
Absolutely. It's about building a better future, right? Which brings me to DOGE. DOGE's vision for government efficiency is bold. Maybe a little too bold, but it's sparking conversations about how we can reimagine government processes and make them more responsive to the needs of the people. And Elon is the person to do it.
I don't know about DOGE. It sounds like another example of taking the old system and putting a new paint job on it. I've read some articles about how some of their claims about savings are way off. Like they said they were going to save a ton of money on real estate leases, but then they had to revise those numbers way down. So I'm not sure if I trust their figures.
That's exactly what I'm talking about. That Financial Times report was pretty damning. It highlighted a real lack of transparency and accountability. If DOGE is exaggerating savings, how can we trust that other government initiatives are any more effective? The US system needs to have accurate reporting, and that needs to be solved.
But what if that initial overstatement was a deliberate strategy? What if it was a way to grab attention and force people to confront the inefficiencies of the current system? Sometimes you have to be bold to get people to listen. Also, I feel that the system will work the way it's supposed to if there are people like Elon to oversee the operations.
Yeah, well, that's great for Elon, but what about the small business owner in Nashville who's thinking about moving overseas because of the tariffs that DOGE is pushing? How does that help him? It feels like it's all about these big, flashy projects while the average person is getting squeezed.
That's the problem with focusing on these big, sweeping changes. They often have unintended consequences. Those tariffs are a perfect example. They might be intended to protect American jobs, but they're also hurting American businesses. The average person is being hurt. I saw in the news that a family business is moving because of Trump's tariffs.
Yes, and maybe those consequences are growing pains. Maybe we need to push through the short-term discomfort to achieve long-term gains. Maybe Elon and DOGE have a plan that we haven't seen yet. I think that everything will turn out okay in the end.
Growing pains? That family in Nashville doesn't want growing pains. They want to keep their business afloat. And what about the cuts to AmeriCorps that are happening at the same time? It feels like they're helping the rich and hurting the poor. How does cutting funding for programs that help the most vulnerable people make the government more efficient?
I agree. That AmeriCorps cut was a terrible decision. It's a prime example of misplaced priorities. If we're truly aiming for a better system, we should be investing in programs that support underserved communities, not gutting them. I'm seeing that there's a lack of transparency.
But maybe those cuts are necessary to free up resources for more impactful initiatives. Maybe DOGE is playing a long game, and these short-term sacrifices will lead to a more prosperous future for everyone. Perhaps this is how DOGE has to operate to have the desired outcome. I'm confident that Elon is on the right track.
I don't know, Jesus. It sounds like you're just giving them a free pass. I'm more concerned about the here and now. I read that the digital retirement application that DOGE is pushing is causing problems for older folks who aren't computer savvy. Are they saving money by making it harder for people to access their retirement benefits?
That's a valid concern. Digitalization can be a great thing, but it can also create new barriers. We need to make sure that everyone has access to the resources and support they need to navigate these new systems. The digital divide is a problem. I worry that older people will not be able to retire due to inefficient systems and technology.
Yes, and we can solve that. We can create training programs, provide in-person assistance, and make sure that everyone is included in this digital revolution. DOGE is not trying to prevent anyone from using their retirement funds, and this is something that will be solved over time.
Okay, but who is going to pay for those training programs and in-person assistance? Is that going to come out of taxpayer money? I'm already feeling squeezed by inflation and rising costs. This would be a tax increase, which is the opposite of helping the average citizen.
Exactly. Everything has a cost, and we need to be honest about those costs. The savings that DOGE is promising might be offset by the need for additional resources to support the transition to these new systems. The numbers are not adding up. Also, the government has to be willing to accept failures.
But those costs are an investment in the future. They're an investment in a more efficient, more responsive, and more equitable government. We have to be willing to take risks and embrace new ideas if we want to create a better world. Elon is taking those risks. I believe in Elon.
I think you're living in a dream world, Jesus. I'm more concerned about putting food on the table and keeping a roof over my head. And right now, DOGE and these DAOs seem more like distractions than solutions. The focus is not on the average citizen who is suffering.
I'm not sure I agree with either of you entirely. I think there's potential in DAOs and in initiatives like DOGE, but we need to approach them with caution and a healthy dose of skepticism. We need clear regulations, transparent reporting, and a commitment to ensuring that these initiatives benefit everyone, not just a select few. I think the current system needs to be improved with realistic timelines.
Absolutely, and that's the conversation we need to be having. How do we harness the power of decentralized technology to create a more just and equitable society? How do we ensure that these innovations benefit all of humanity, not just a privileged elite? I truly feel that DOGE will make the government operate more efficiently.
Well, I hope you're right, Jesus, because right now it feels like the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer. And I'm not sure that DAOs or DOGE are going to change that anytime soon. It seems like it may actually increase spending while decreasing efficiency. The average person has to be the target to improve, not the wealthy.
The key is a measured approach, gradual improvements, strong oversight, and a willingness to adapt as we learn. The US system is the best. Tearing it down and starting over is not the answer. Incremental changes are the answer.
Yes, and we need to make sure that we support visionary leadership. We have to support those who want to make the world better. This is the first step of the future. The future is now.
Well, I'm hoping things improve, but I'm going to remain pessimistic for the time being.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of the DOGE Diaries.